Welcome to the Be Here Now Guest Podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Each week, our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
We want to welcome you all here. We feel it's really like coming home when we come to San Francisco because we're received with so much love and so much acceptance. We're here tonight to talk about relationship as a path of awakening. How to make relationship part of our spiritual practice. However we might define spiritual practice, how we can learn to open our hearts, how we can learn to work with our holding, with our grief, with the mind's judgments, how to be more present, so that we can really be alive, so that we can really take birth, to really enjoy and feel the vibrancy, the gift that we're given. How we can join with another being, be it our partner or our friends, to open to our parents, our children, the mailman, the people we meet every day at work, our boss. How can we make life part of our inner healing?
We've been involved in spiritual practice for some years. But we see that in spiritual communities, as well as in general communities, the most difficult aspect of life is often silhouetted in relationship. So many yogis' minds so quiet until they visit home. So easy to see God in Buddha, in Ananda Ma, in Mary, in Jesus. So hard to see it in your mother, in your husband, in your children, in ourselves. Really, whenever we talk about relationship, we're talking about our relationship to ourselves in some other form. Relationship offers us an opportunity to open our heart in hell. The difficulty of relationship is one of its most exquisite opportunities for purification, for healing. One of our teachers, Suzuki Roshi, used to say, "Nothing happens outside yourself." But it's hard to take that much responsibility, to realize that your mate is just the other hemisphere of your brain, the other ventricle of your heart, the other half of your body. So easy to be in relationship, so hard to relate. We're not experts. I have been married 3 times. Ondrea has been married twice. But sooner or later, you're bound to get the message if you're... I think we always looked at relationship as 2 people looking at each other. But we always found in our relationship something missing. Now we've come to see that relationship isn't just I and other, but is a triangle between Ondrea and I and God, Ondrea and I and the truth, whatever word you're comfortable with. I'm very comfortable with the word God because I don't have the foggiest idea what it means. But its experience is the experience of our essential nature of love. In a very real way, in our relationship, our priority is not each other so much as it is awakening. So the rescue hallucinations that separate us, the helper and helped, the I and other, on which all fear and cruelty is based, starts to dissolve in a willingness to approach the truth. Not always the ability, but a willingness to try to let go of what keeps hearts separate. Relationship is always with oneself. It is the parts of myself that I find difficult to open to, that I may judge in another. Indeed, when we even say other people, we literally mean other aspects of ourselves. I don't mean that even metaphysically, though that is equally correct. It's never someone else. Now that is quite remarkable. It's never someone else. It means touching ourselves with a mercy and awareness that we've never thought possible, never thought was accessible. If my heart closes to Ondrea, to my parents, to my children, to myself, I know that my mind is full. And to let go of what keeps us separate from God, which means to let go of what keeps us separate from each other. I use the word AIDS community because then that impugns that the gay community is the AIDS community, and it is not. Obviously, AIDS is not a gay disease. The virus is blind. In that community, though, the healing we see in the gay community, I don't see paralleled in any spiritual community in the world, in the sense of people letting go of those qualities in the mind that keeps hearts separate. An exquisite lesson in dying into life, in letting the heart burst and go on. A great teaching for us all in noticing what keeps us separate and just no longer willing to maintain that suffering in ourselves and to encourage it in the world. Letting go of our suffering is the hardest work we will ever do. But we've got nothing better to do. If you've got anything better to do than let go of your suffering, go for it. But just stand a foot or two away from me when you do it, if you will. Relationship defines the separation between our mind and our heart. That's why relationship is at times so difficult. Our minds so weary and confused, our hearts so willing.
We see as an essential part of working on ourselves some kind of a daily practice. I'm not saying that everyone has to meditate, because that's not everyone's way. But some technique, some practice that will help us connect with ourselves, will help us open our hearts, learn to forgive ourselves so that we might forgive others. And for us, and we can only speak of our practice, we see that in having a daily practice, you build a ground and a confidence so that when we come against our edges, when there's holding in the mind, when there's anger, when there's grief, we have some extra space for that. And we tend to not take it so personally. Part of our practice is to let go of the personal, the mind's attachment to itself. Not that that can be done so easily, but we find in relationship we use responders, different playful techniques, so that when one of us is caught in some mental stuff, the other one can help to break a certain pattern. If I was caught in anger and I was, if only this, if only that, and the mind was going on, in one of our responders, he might just put his thumb up. And then I remember, then I know to soften my belly, take a few breaths, close my mouth, and really feel what's going on, as opposed to creating the stuff that separates us. So softening the belly can be a wonderful practice in letting go. It'll bring more concentration in your life, so there'll be more awareness, more clarity. We'll teach ourselves the ability to respond more appropriately in the moment, instead of react, as most of us do when we're caught in these strong states of mind.
Whenever we're right, our belly is hard. It's very hard to kiss someone who's keeping a stiff upper lip. So many levels of relationship. I remember a woman who we had known for some time had some experiences of a deeper level of herself than she had encountered previously, and was quite overwhelmed with a love of God and a desire to serve. And as she moved more profoundly into that state, she found that all she wanted to do was feed the hungry, help the poor, and didn't have time to feed her children, didn't have time to maintain the house. And her husband was confused and attempted to be supportive. Her children felt rejected, but didn't quite know what to do. And the more she thought she had to feed God, the less she could see God in her children, in her husband, in her friends. She called one day and said, "All I want to do is serve. All I want to do is serve. What should I do?" We said, "Ham and eggs." When people come to Mother Teresa and say, "I want to serve, I want to help," she says, before you consider serving others, look into your family. Is there anyone who needs anything there that you could give and that isn't being given? She said, if it's not happening at home, what makes you think it'll be happening in the streets? Now that's a very shiny mirror to look into. How much work, how much healing we might manifest in touching our parents with loving kindness, instead of judgment, instead of change, instead of avoidance. There's so much work for us to do right at home, right in the marketplace where we work. It may not be as showy as tending the dying, but it's as valuable, both for our own healing and for the healing of those around us.
Now that's a tough one to hear. Even when Stephen says parents, we just left my parents a few days ago, and I've spent years talking about difficulties with my parents and difficulties in the way that I was raised. And after this meeting, I've seen for the first time that the years of working with forgiveness, it's changed our relationship in such an incredible way. It's been very subtle, and it's built very slowly. And until the last couple days, I don't even think I noticed how deeply we've all been healed by simply forgiving. And it's not that they're doing forgiveness on me. It's just that I've done forgiveness on myself and for whatever holding I've had toward them. And it took years and years of anger and working on myself through every kind of therapy. And I've had cancer twice. And aura balancing, Bach flower, you name it. I tried it. And then finally I realized that maybe I need to go in instead of out. And in simply doing forgiveness, I was as surprised as anyone. There was forgiveness in the room. Now that wasn't all of it. There was other things floating around too. And there was holding, and many times I had to soften my belly. Many times, or at least a few times, I could see myself getting back into the old banter and having to soften and let go and not be right, because my attachment to being right has really just created more separation. So if we could leave you with anything, forgiveness. To think of what forgiveness really means. And I'm not saying to forgive the actions, not at all the actions, but to forgive the actor and what that might do for our own healing.
What keeps us separate is our grief. really the definition of unfinished business is our grief. All the losses that we have closed our heart to, which means all the parts of ourselves, all the parts of our life that we've withdrawn from. But finishing business with a loved one does not mean that they come to understand us, or even that they forgive us, or even that they tell us that we were right all along, and how wonderful we are as they touch their forehead to our feet. And other nightmares. To finish business is to touch that person with love. To end relationship as business. Unfinished business is, I'm me and you're you, and I'll give you 5 if you give me 5. And if you give me 4, I'll give you 3. And if you give me 2, I'm going to take my bat and ball and go home. I won't play anymore. Relationship as business is usually the way it goes. And of course, what else has been encouraged in our lives? But the end of business is when I bring you into my heart. Because if I need anything from you, even your forgiveness, then you'll be an object in my mind instead of the subject of my heart. And whatever I want from you will block our real connection. It looks great on paper. In theory, it sounds so easy, but our holding is so deep, so profound, that it's often very painful to let go of our suffering. We use our fear to protect us, to keep us separate. Yet we're with so many people on their deathbeds who looking back at their lives, shake their head and say, what was that all about? I thought life was something that was coming. It's gone now. John Lennon has that wonderful line, life is what's happening while we're busy making other plans. All that unfinished business from not being right here in this moment, right in just this much, in this millisecond, where all relationship is to be experienced directly, not as a dream, not life as an afterthought, not looking back over our shoulder to see who we were, but just taking a single step in mercy, in awareness, relating to the solidity of the moment, the ground that comes to meet your foot and dissolves for the next step. And the next. One of the exquisite qualities of relationship is its lack of control. You can all breathe out now. A few faces were bluing a little bit. You have no control. Moods change. Concepts, belief systems change. If that other person is thought of as some reflection of you, if you need them to be some way, there'll be so much unfinished business. Look at how many people relate to their children, angry at their children for not being who they despise themselves for not being. In the I Ching, the Chinese book of wisdom, there's a hexagram called the army. And in that hexagram, it says you really can't overcome the enemy until you have rid yourself of that which you find despicable in them. What power relationship has as a mirror. Indeed, in grief, for instance, when a loved one dies, much of what we experience is that when I say I love you, when you say you love me, you come into the room and I just love you. Now that love isn't coming from you. When I love you, that love is coming from here. You have become a mirror for my heart. So when you die, that reflection of my deepest nature is broken, and I grieve so the broken connection with myself. Because it takes so long to be able to relate from our heart to ourselves, to finish business with ourselves enough that the mind sinks into the heart, so that our heart can be open even to our heart being closed. Moods, changes. Ironically, one of the qualities of the heart opening is that the further it has opened, the further it has to close. So the more your heart is open, the more the experience of being closed will seem more closed than you've ever been in your whole life. And never will the grief of the heart being closed be more evident. The more open your heart, the more dense it feels each time it closes. But to let the heart have room for the heart to be closed, you can't force the heart open. If you and your loved one wake up in the morning and both hearts, that's the season of the heart that day, and both hearts are closed, is there room for the hearts to be closed? Isn't it okay your heart's closed? It better be. Because otherwise, when your heart is closed, you'll think you're not okay, and you'll put yourself yet further out of your heart. Of course, it's all right that the heart is closed sometimes. I know some extraordinary people, but I don't know that I've ever met anyone whose heart's open all the time. When we speak of love and forgiveness, people will often come up and say, well, it sounds wonderful, but my heart is very seldom open. I very seldom really experience the depth of love. I must not be a very good person. How merciless we are with ourselves. In this realm of grief and confusion and impermanence, a moment of love is a miracle. How wonderful that we're even capable of experiencing love in the midst of all the fear and dread and self-interest we have. It's a miracle. Each moment of love so precious, not needing more, each moment so full, so complete. And we learn to love by watching how unloving we often are, in a merciful way, with forgiveness, so that we're finishing business with ourselves, with others, so that we are making room in our heart, using qualities like forgiveness to deepen the connection with our original nature. In working with forgiveness, you forgive the actor, not the action. If you were forgiving a rape, you're not condoning rape. If you were forgiving Hitler, you're not condoning the cruelty. But you are, amongst other things, touching the cruel within yourself with mercy. You are healing out of the cruel. You are bringing it within the circle of responsibility where you are able to respond when anger or fear is in the mind, instead of having to react. The basis of compassion is non-injury. Before we think of vast landscapes of glittering, luminescent, unconditional love, and other things in Cracker Jack's boxes, let us look at the injury we do to ourselves and our loved ones. Non-injury, nothing showy, not feeding the hungry, not working with AIDS patients, not helping battered women, just not allowing that quality which causes suffering from others to be deepened in yourself, but instead to be healed by bringing it into a merciful, forgiving awareness. Sometimes as a means of touching how much of ourselves we put out of our hearts, we'll say to a group, no one deserves to suffer. No one deserves to suffer. If your mind, or as your mind says, but, how about? That's the part of yourself you will no longer relate to with mercy and awareness. If Hitler deserves to suffer, how is the cruel inside of you going to be healed into the responsible instead of left out in the freezing cold of reactivity, of more violence in a world already overflowing, bursting with unkindness and indifference? We can't be indifferent to the cruelty inside ourselves. To learn to be loving, we have to meet with mercy the unloving in ourselves.